This is Transqat. What is Transqat? Transqat is a safe space. It's a place for respectful conversations about transgender issues. It's a place for queer people to come tell their stories. I'm host Clare McCarthy. Welcome to Transqat. Welcome back, everyone. Hope everybody listening coped well with the brutal cold and winds this past week. My cats have been living on top of the heating vents, bogarting all the heat before it can reach me. I tried to have a conversation with them and explain that, I'm the one paying the heating bill. None of them cared. Anyway, you are about to meet two really lovely people, Briana McGuckin and Tony Palmieri. They generously agreed to talk with me about the polyamorous closed throuple that they were a part of. Now, if those words are new to you, please join me in learning about poly. Here's Tony and Briana.
I'm learning it for an audition for this weekend. Yeah.
Now I'm mad I didn't do the Quality of Mercy speech.
It's actually an audition for Prospero in The Tempest, and the director said he'd love to see someone come in and do the opening of Richard III. And I was like, it took me forever to make a connection there, and I'm going with Prospero is certainly humble by the end of the play. Mm-hmm. And there's humility in that. Yeah. There's a lot of humility in that speech. So
this thing of darkness I own. Is it I own?
I think so, yeah.
What production is this?
It's Hole in the Wall Theater in New Britain.
Well, we are sitting in Tony's Flower Shop in Cromwell, Connecticut. So, Tony, I think we'll start with you. If I could just have you both introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Tony Palmieri. I'm a baker, do some acting and directing, general all-around artistic guy.
I'm Briana McGuckin, and I'm an author of romantic suspense fiction.
But I understand you're moving soon.
Yes, I'm moving to Ireland.
And you're going to take me with you? I've got the suitcase I can fit in.
Good,
you want to just...
Yeah, I mean, if you're donating the suitcase, then that's fine.
Well, yes, but I'm going to be in it.
Yeah, as long as I don't have to worry about the logistics, you can come.
Okay. Well, guys, we are here to talk about a relationship that I am sitting with 2/3 of. And I just want to hear your story, so I don't really know where we want to start. I'll leave that up to you guys.
I started it.
It's true.
When I met my, at the time, fiance, Joshua, we met on a dating app, and one of the things he wrote me was, I just wrote you this long message, and then I accidentally clicked on this dude that was in my recent history, and now I lost it. And so that was a very big part of, a very, very open part of the beginning of our relationship, was that he had just kind of owned up to being bisexual. And when we started dating seriously and he wanted to be exclusive, I said, did you ever get to date a guy? And he said no. And I said, okay, well, that feels important to me for you. Also, I'm into that. So if you ever meet anybody that you like, you should tell me. And years went by, and sometimes I would be like, what about that guy? And like, no, that one? And then I wanted to do these auditions for this production of the Rocky Horror Show that I used to go to when I was 16 and 17 and 18 and 19 and so on. And so we were at auditions one year, and Tony was there auditioning for Frankenfurter. And I said, what about him? And Joshua was like, ready to say no, as usual, and went, he wouldn't like me. And I was like,
Now, before you met Joshua, how involved with all things queer were you?
I think so. I think I'm a queer part of the queer community, in that I'm a woman who likes men, but I definitely like men who are effeminate, and I often find that the men that I'm attracted to turn out to be gay. And I think that Rocky Horror has a lot to do with that. My mom had the option of giving me the Birds and the Bees talk or showing me Rocky Horror, and she chose Rocky Horror, and I really
Wow.
At the beginning of Sweet Transvestite, I turned to my mother and I said, is that a man or a woman? And she said, just watch. And so I watched the whole song, and he goes back up the elevator, and I turned to her again and I said, is that a man or a woman? And she said, does it matter? And I said, no,
Yeah.
So here, before we come back to the important stuff, when you're trying out for Frankenfurter,
Yes.
how do you not just do a Tim Curry impersonation?
Well, here's the thing. So this was my second year doing this production with this company. And the first year I went in saying, I don't sing, I want to audition for the narrator. And they made me sing, and they cast me as Riff Raff. They had already cast somebody as Frankenfurter. And we were into rehearsals, and they were pushing for a Tim Curry impersonation. And the person that they cast as Frank was not enthusiastic. And we were outside at a break, and the director was frustrated about it. The person that was playing Frank wasn't there. And I said, yeah, I just want to kick him out of the way and do it myself. And he went in and fired that guy and gave me the role. So that was for me, that was very much, I was just talking, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wasn't prepared to put on fishnets and a corset. But I mean, I was like, okay, if I'm doing this, I'm going all the way for it.
Well, you can't play that role casually.
No,
it
has to be a full commitment. And so I did it that year, and I did my best Tim Curry impression. And then when I went back the year that I did it with Briana and Joshua, I was a little less Tim Curry. I refused to shave. I did all the makeup and,
Yeah.
But I kept stubble on my face, and then I directed a version of Rocky Horror that had nothing to do with the film. That was a very different take on it, just to get that out of my system. But
now, as far as who you saw yourself as up till that point,
so I was. That's a long answer.
Okay.
But I got engaged when I was 17. Got married when I was 18. Always felt sexual attraction toward men, but it just hadn't occurred to me growing up in the 70s that an emotional connection with a man was possible until I felt it. And then, so I came out, and I spent a lot of years, including the years that I spent with, some of the years I spent with Briana and Joshua, really struggling with giving myself a name, calling myself gay, but I kept also having relationships with women and going back to, no, I'm gay. This isn't working because I'm gay. So I think that at that point, the first time I played Frank, I was married to a woman who knew that who I was, and I was still not really comfortable with putting a label on myself. But also, I've always been a little genderqueer. I always, when my hair was long, braided it. I wear eye makeup, lipstick sometimes, skirts. So I've never. I think that the struggle with Frank was more about owning myself as a hypersexual being than it was a gender identity thing. So I think that was the thing that made me.
It's interesting you say that, because I have sort of heard over the course of doing this podcast that for many of the younger generation of queer folks, labels just aren't as important as
Right.
I also grew up in the 70s and early 80s, and when I finally found the label that made sense to me, I hung on to that because it probably helped save my life. That notion of, okay, it's not just me, this is a thing, and here's the thing.
Yeah.
But a healthier society wouldn't really need those labels.
Right. I love the word queer to describe myself because it's so open.
Yeah.
It's whatever it is.
I like that
We
too.
can all be queer.
Yeah.
We all are queer.
Everybody at this table.
Yes. And most of the people that we meet, whether they have embraced it or not, it's inclusive, and it leaves room to be who you are. It leaves enough room to change and grow and be who you are.
Does that ring with how you look at it as well?
Yeah, so I'm back in the dating pool very recently, and coming back into that, it's a little startling to me, talking to a genderqueer person who goes by they, them, and, said, I'm very queer. And then we were talking about who they're attracted to, and they said, women, just women. And I was so like, whoa, wow, what? Just me, huh?
There you go.
And that's cool. I think that it's cool that now queer is a term. You're invited to say more, but now we're living in a group where we're saying, I want to know the ways that you're weird. I want to know the ways that you're different from me, instead of bonding over the ways that we're the same as each other.
Which seems like a bit of a contradiction, but it's not. The fact that it's the differences under that queer umbrella, the differences that can lead to attraction. So you're at the Rocky Horror.
Yep.
And you point Tony out to Joshua, and he shows his hand.
Yes.
I would be attracted to this person.
Just very slightly.
But what's going through your head and your heart because after a number of this guy, no, this guy, no, it's possibly more real.
Yeah. And, I don't know whether it was just me being a naive 22-year-old or whatever, but it didn't occur to me to be like, oh, wow, this is scarier now that it's real. A big part of it is that Joshua was never a person that I thought would have been disloyal or lied. We had a rock solid understanding between us. We'd both been cheated on before and experienced what it was to be lied to. And one of the first ways that we bonded was, man, I would never put another person that I profess to care about through what I went through when I found out someone was lying to me. And so things like that didn't worry me. Things like not being able to share what we were thinking didn't bother me. My place in the relationship didn't, I wasn't scared. I was just excited because I also thought Tony was cute. And like I said, that was part of my being like, you should do this was, and maybe I could watch. What could I? I mean,
such a sacrifice.
I mean, I'm being so cool about it. You could just leave the door open. So I was just excited. I was, and the fact that it was the guy who ended up playing Frankenfurter, I was like, how perfect is this?
So, Tony, they approached you as a couple rather than, or did Joshua come to you individually?
Well, no. What happened is that, so we had a Facebook group with the cast, and a friend of mine was playing Rocky. His name was Aaron, and I made a joke about kissing him during the pool scene. And Briana, Joshua wasn't very big on social media. Briana messaged me immediately.
It was on the page.
Was it right on the thread?
Yeah.
And said, you should kiss Joshua. It's not okay for him to be with women, but we have an understanding. And so then I messaged you. Yes.
Yes.
I was like, are you serious? Because I was in a situation where a marriage to a woman was ending, and I was in sort of a polyamorous thing with some other people that was also ending. Mm-hmm. And I thought Joshua was cute at auditions. I saw him and thought, oh, he's cute. And then I saw that he was with Briana and went,
right,
okay, hands off. I was so careful on stage, as he was Brad and I was Frank. So I was very careful because I was attracted to him to not be gross, He was in a relationship. So this was a real revelation for me that...
that didn't really come around until the end of the run.
No, it was the end of the run, yeah. It was, so we had gone through the whole rehearsal process. And
it was the actual Halloween show that they kissed during the floor show.
And Briana and I had been talking about other things privately, just other life things. And so we had gotten to know each other. So yeah, I was very open to the idea, having kind of gotten my feet wet in a polyamorous situation, with an understanding of what didn't really work for me about that particular situation.
Just to branch away from the story of the relationship itself, is there and this is just my ignorance, so I'm sorry. Is there sort of a poly community in the way that, when a queer kid today says, okay, I am non-binary,
Mm-hmm.
there are places that they can go to see, for lack of a better word, templates of how that might look in their lives, and they can weigh, okay, is that me? Am I trans? Am I non-binary? What's the deal? Is there that sort of community for poly?
We never found one. I think that we met other poly people, but no one's situation was the same as ours in that it was it was the three of us and we were together, and we were super wholesome, very committed, and we were
Closed.
a family
Yeah.
like any other family. The other poly people, we knew people that were closed, but they were not fully integrated, as in it was a woman and two men, and the two men were not together. They were both with the woman. My previous experience was that my ex-wife wanted to open our marriage, and I met some people through theater, someone who also wanted to open her a friend who wanted to open her relationship, and I was attracted to her boyfriend. So that was those dynamics were very different. It was just she had a person and her boyfriend, and I was with her boyfriend as well. It didn't feel committed to me.
Well, you both just used the term closed. So just, I think I understand what that means, but tell me.
That we only had sexual encounters within our throuple and not outside of it. And that to the question about, is there a community? What I think is difficult for poly folks versus maybe an existing queer community is that, there's some argument about this, that people say that poly is a sexuality versus being a monogamous person. But I think it's more about your relationships between people than it is about who you are, as like whether you're identifying as queer or not or something, or whatever your identity is. Poly is a configuration of people that this is what you're doing. It's not who you are, it's what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's where we ran into so many differences, is you could find people who were also doing something different, but they weren't doing what you were doing. There were people who understood that we were poly and so immediately thought, oh, Tony's on the table, I can pursue Tony. Or Joshua's on the table, I can pursue Joshua. And to have to stop and be like, no, we're all just the three of us with each other. It's just like a marriage, it's just got three people in it.
And people's brains always went to sex.
Right.
That was always the first question, was who's doing it with who? Do all of you do it together? And like...
Lots of clarifying questions on those points.
Right. And I don't mind answering those questions, but is that the most interesting thing about what we're this, uncharted territory for us that we're in? This sex was an issue, as it is in any relationship, but the interpersonal stuff was much more at the front of that's where we had to be careful.
Well, let's go there. What are you offering, and what are you taking from the other two people emotionally?
Can I jump in?
Oh, please do.
So Joshua was very clear that when we agreed to Tony, when they were beginning to talk about this, once Rocky Horror was over and it was kind of like becoming a more serious, real thing, he said, Briana, when we talked about doing this, part of it that was that she was interested in being involved, even in like a passive, just kind of voyeuristic way. And even because I knew that Tony was getting divorced from his wife, and I didn't know how that was going to go. What I didn't expect Joshua to say was, that's kind of part of what makes it okay with him, that she's also getting something out of this. I don't want to just be doing something and she's still just living the same life that she was living. So we were working toward that, but it wasn't something that was going to happen at the same speed that Tony and Joshua were getting together for dates and things. But at the same time, I was kind of rediscovering my interest in kink, and I had been trying to explore that with Joshua, and he did not like it.
Okay.
And
Very gentle person.
yes, very, very gentle, sweet person who could not understand what it was that was drawing me to that. Wanted to give me what I wanted, but was like, I don't want to hurt you. And at the same time, Tony and I had been talking, and I mentioned this, and he was like, well, what does that entail? And so I started to give him like a crash course, BDSM 101, and we were talking about how a lot of it is power dynamics, and it's much more emotional and mental. I mean, people focus on the physical stuff, but I think the real power in BDSM is the power exchange, emotionally and mentally, and that you get all this control to put barriers on, like, here's how far I'm willing to go, and here's what I'm not willing to do. And I think in that context, with those parameters, Tony was like, I'll do that with you. And so that's what it was from my perspective, was that I got to have this emotional, mental kink relationship with Tony, and also not stress Joshua out by putting that on top of a very, like, sweet,
Right.
tight-knit marriage.
That ask, the ask is made, and there's that sense of, as you said, okay, I want to give you what you want, but I'm just not comfortable with this. That then over time becomes a wedge issue, even if you're working not to. It's always sitting there.
Yes.
So the ability to resolve that a little bit in a healthy way.
Yes, so Halloween was when Tony and Joshua first kissed, and we got together with Tony for Christmas, and I remember after Christmas coming to Joshua before I went to Tony and saying, I think I'm also interested in Tony, like, separate from you. I think I am. And I was so scared because that was not a thing that we had really talked about, and I didn't know how he was going to react, and his reaction was, oh, thank God. Now it's not just my thing anymore. And I think that speaks to what you're saying about, you want to give your partner what they want, but if you really can't, then it starts to, there's a focus on that. Even if your partner's not being mean about it,
right,
you're fixated on, oh God, I can't do this thing.
Yeah, right. And I'm Irish, so my standard response is, it's fine. I'm fine. It's fine.
Yep.
It doesn't matter.
But
that's not healthy.
The consuming guilt.
Yeah. So, Tony, tell me about you. Same question.
So, emotionally, I think that I was looking for, I don't know, I thought that there were really incredible things about Briana and Joshua's relationship. There's an age gap between us, and yet in so many ways, the way that they treated one another was more evolved than any relationship that I had ever had. That was very interesting to me, the way that they cared for one another, the way that they respected one another, the way that they could have a discussion and not hate each other or fight or be mean to each other or slam doors. And I was coming off a very volatile marriage, 12, 14-year relationship that certainly at that point, I did not have any perspective on myself or who I was or how far from my core self I had gotten. So I got a lot of that from Briana and Joshua. I feel so lucky to have found that relationship when I found it, so that I could be my best self, be a better version of myself. I made a lot of mistakes. I had been getting this narrative pounded into my head about how I was gay and I shouldn't be in relationships with women. And I just had this coming out of this marriage. And I said a lot of things to Briana at the beginning of the relationship that talk about driving a wedge. They just were things that I couldn't take back, that I discovered later that I didn't mean, that I didn't understand myself enough to be able to say the word queer. You know what I mean? It had to be this hard line for me. So I got a lot of understanding and a lot of respect, self-respect back, and an understanding of how people should treat one another. As far as what I brought, I think it brought a lot of life experience, a lot of, I think Briana especially really grew as a person throughout our relationship, and that's something that we provide for each other, perspective. And
Yeah, I think Joshua made me safe. I had a tumultuous childhood, and meeting Joshua and building a relationship with Joshua, we very deliberately set out, okay, we're not going to be a household where doors get slammed. We're not going to be a household where we shout at each other. Those are not things that we're going to do. We're going to keep each other safe. Home is going to be a safe place to be. And I think when Tony came along, he reintroduced taking risks into my repertoire. I was getting so used to being safe. And what Tony and I really bonded over before the end of the Rocky run was both being artists, being poets, being writers, liking to make things, liking to challenge ourselves. Yeah, so I think there was a tumultuous period where Tony really wasn't sure if he and I were going to work. Even when we were starting to explore kink, he would close the door on me if I got too close too fast. But we had this emotional, artistic link where I felt like I could see who he was and that we were similar people. And of course you're not going to keep that door shut on me, because we're both shakers of the status quo.
Yeah. Relationships, society kind of approaches the same way they do gender, in that there's this insistence that it be a binary.
Yeah.
And that anything other than that is just not ultimately sustainable. When you go into a poly relationship like that, is there any fear that the other two are going to end up together and I'm going to end up alone?
There was for me.
Yeah.
I was entering an established relationship at a very emotional point in my life. And so it took me a long time to feel like an equal part of that relationship. Once that fear was gone, I absolutely felt like we had reached a point where if one of us needed to get out, it was all or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
That would
be the dissolution of this unit. Yeah.
Yes.
That speaks to the word you kept using, which is safe, right? Is that you've got this now home is a slightly different dynamic, but that's still the goal. I need to feel safe in my home. I'm not going to be making good decisions. I'm not going to be making progress on getting to my core self if I'm not secure where I live. So that makes perfect sense to me. The day-to-day stuff. Now, were the three of you living together?
Very quickly.
How did the day-to-day of that work out? Now, this is the boring question, but it's really the thing that ends up cracking a lot of relationships is how did you go about deciding who does the laundry, who does the groceries, who's doing the cooking? How do we decide the things we need to decide?
So I was for many years the one who had the cushy state job, and Joshua too was kind of headed down that path as well, and Tony was like, I just want to be a house husband. And so that was kind of where we landed for a while. It got to a point where I think the same thing that happens in your general run-of-the-mill heteronormative situation happens, where Tony had a moment of like, I can't do this by myself. Why do I have to do everything around here?
We had a giant house. A 5-bedroom giant house.
Yeah.
It was a lot to keep clean.
Yeah. But, it was very domestic for a while. I read to Tony every evening while he cooked. It was fun.
Nice.
Yeah. That was a lot of fun. I don't know, logistically, what else I can tell you. The bed problem, my God. 3 people in one bed. Because they're both, broader shouldered than I am, and so I was the one who is the most akin to a lizard and wants and wants blankets and warmth and like is willing to take the middle. But then again, there needs to be a fan on because the men want cooler, and the air is shooting down the gap between their shoulders at me. And you know, you got to get up to pee in the middle of the night, and you have to actually shimmy down the middle of the bed.
Oh, so you go down to the bottom? And get, yeah.
Either that, or I have to wake one of the, you know, and I was going through a thing where I was getting up a lot in the middle of the night, and it's like, every time it's like, do I annoy? Okay, how many times have I annoyed Joshua? Is Tony going to wake up if I shake him? Tony was a startler, so, like, I really didn't like to, because there would be a big gasp. Like someone was going to murder him. And it's like, no, it's just the same thing that's happened every single night of the last 6 years. I just need to be...
and also, we're on a king-size bed that is turned the other way so that it's longer.
Okay.
So it's a little too short for me and Joshua. And there is a twin bed pushed up against that for the dog. So there's no easy way out on my side because there's a dog in a bed. And it was hot.
Speaking to your point about, you know, the most interesting thing to most people was what are the sexual configurations. Meanwhile, I think we're dying for people to be like, how do you sleep comfortably?
Yes. I am very persnickety about how I can and cannot sleep. And that idea of making that more complicated fills me with dread.
Yeah.
Yeah. Toward the end of the relationship, I was trying to advocate for something that we had talked about but never done for a long time, and I think it would have been a really good idea. What we had decided for a while was that everybody was going to get like a date night a week, and it didn't mean that that was the only time that two of the people could go and hang out together, but it assured that there was one night every week where you were just sleeping, literally sleeping, physically sleeping with one person in a bed, so that you had that opportunity for just being close and not having the same logistical whatever. And so the third person getting a night on their own, I think it could have been cool to explore more of that. Almost like the throuple sleep would have been the rarity. Like, but mostly it's 2 and 1. And that it's shifting and changing more often would have been cool.
The full integration, did that involve bank accounts?
Everyone was separate.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was true of just Joshua and me as well. That wasn't, because I think that would have felt weird if Joshua and I had had joint accounts and then Tony was on his own. But no, we were always that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, because I'm assuming there are no legal protections for throuples.
No, they were legally married.
They were legally married,
yes.
and they brought you in, right?
Yes. But no, there was no recognition, legal recognition of my part of the relationship at all.
Apparently you can do that. I've seen in passing blog posts about what it is that you tell a lawyer that you want to do in order to put another person kind of in something close to the same legal consideration, but I think there are some brick walls that you hit that just are not.
Insurance and things like that are still brick walls.
Insurance, yeah.
Or like hospital visit in an emergency, like I don't, yeah.
Well, particularly that I'm asking that because I have just been reading something that was kind of set during the peak COVID years, and that whole notion back in 2020, 2021 of you can't visit anybody in the hospital, and who has access and rights to those things. That it was a problem during the AIDS pandemic,
Yeah.
right? Since you could not get legally married, there were partners, longtime partners, who were being turned away by the hospital. You have no right to be here.
Yeah, and we were susceptible to that same feeling of not being legitimate because of that. As an example, so I came to the relationship with 2 dogs, and when my dog was sick, our dog was sick, we took him to the vet, and it was going to cost a lot of money, and this was at the point where I wasn't working. We didn't have an integrated bank account, and I didn't know what to do. Like, I didn't know what to do, and I said, if you guys can pay for it, I'll pay you back. And I just felt like it brought so much shame to me. And I could
didn't
tell
know that you felt that.
Yeah. And I remember Briana saying on the ride home, seeming upset, and I thought that she was upset at me because I was borrowing money. And what you said it right away, don't worry. She said that she was upset because it felt like I was saying that he wasn't her dog too. So that's all societal. I wouldn't have, if I was in a relationship with just Briana or just Joshua, and I brought a dog into the house, I wouldn't have thought twice about him or Briana paying for the what the dog needed.
But because the dynamic was different.
The dynamic was different. There was just something there that kept me from feeling that, and was nothing that they did. It was an outside societal norm thing that was getting to me. So that was a big wake-up moment for me about how much other people's and society's expectations and understanding played into our own dynamics in ways that we didn't even see.
Yeah. When you asked about, was there a sense of, I'm going to call it hierarchy, of being, being the odd person out, or what's going to happen if we break up, or two of the three going to stay together, and things like that. That came out so much from other people's reactions to our breakup, where we got clued into how other people thought about us based on what their assumptions were in the immediate aftermath of being told that the throuple had broken up. People assuming that Joshua and Tony had left me, people assuming that Joshua and I had left Tony, just all kinds of stuff like that. And when we were trying to, we really only found the right therapist for a throuple toward the end of the relationship, when we were trying to just bring closure in a way that was healthy so that we could all stay friends. Our therapist really brought to the fore that all of that stuff, the friend groups not understanding, friend groups not knowing what to do with when you're going through a feeling, really comes to bear on the way that the people in the relationship feel about the relationship, in ways that are real and that you wouldn't expect. Because if you're just in a heteronormative marriage and I'm talking to a girlfriend about something that happened and between us, and someone can just say, oh God, that sucks, I hope you guys talk about it, or whatever, because these things happen. But if you bring something, this happened the other night and I'm really hurt, what if that person's inner feeling is not, oh, that's sad, I hope they work it out? What if it's, knew that was coming?
You brought that on yourself because of the nature of the relationship.
Because of my judgments about how your relationship is going to pan out.
How do you weigh that? Telling heteronormative folks, family, coworkers, here's the nature of our relationship, as opposed to deciding, you know what, they don't need to know this.
I never got to a point where anyone that I told didn't feel that I was confessing something that I needed them to absolve me of guilt for. There were so many, the people that I told, the people that Joshua told, so many reactions had to do with whether or not they judged us. And it's man, I'm not telling you because I wanted your opinion. I'm telling you who I am so that you know who my family is, and so you're not confused. I'm not inviting you in. I'm just telling you what reality is. I wouldn't do that. Yeah, I wasn't asking you to.
That's fine. That's just fine.
But that's the line, is I think there's a lot of pressure that it's any way that you're different. For the queer community, telling someone that you're non-binary, telling someone that you're gay, there's this reaction of well, I don't want to know that. It's I don't care if you want to know it. I'm telling you because there are realities about my life that you're going to encounter, and I would like you to know what they mean to me. When a woman comes in and says, oh, my husband and I are pregnant, you don't go, why are you talking to me about your sex life? Right. You go, congratulations. You had to go up against this wall of, oh, do they need to know that? Do I have to go through this whole thing that I'm going to go through when I tell them? Well, yes, because my family is my family. That's important.
And when I would tell someone, when I would just happily tell someone, because I'm proud of my family and because we worked hard. We worked really hard to respect one another, and it's not an easy thing to do. I got a lot of people assuming that I was doing it to be shocking, that I can find a lot of easier ways to be shocking than that. I promise.
Don't put me at emotional risk.
Exactly.
But that is a common thread with gender identity, gender presentation, that and it's part of the pushback against trans youth is you don't know what you're doing. You're just doing this for attention. It's just a phase. If you weren't seeing this on the TV, you would never do this on your own.
And also, so what? Like, that's the reality of it. Explore whatever you want to explore. Why can't you be free to do that? And then be who you are next week. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I don't understand, is that if I'm coming to someone and saying, this is my relationship, it makes me very happy, the correct response is, great. I'm happy for you. And I was always willing to answer anyone's questions, whatever they were. They were rarely interesting.
And I think part of that is that people can't possibly begin to imagine all of the intricacies that we were running into. I think that, this is such a new idea to me that I only have the first thing that slapped me in the face about it. And that's going to take me 6 months to get through, so...
Yeah, where the coming out, if you will, is all about the people who are hearing it rather than it's like it's not your story. You don't need to put yourself into the narrative.
Right. Yeah, and we've been not together for over 2 years now. And this week I encountered somebody who had very strong feelings about our relationship. Somebody who I've talked to and known throughout, and that I just cut off. I just was like, oh, wow, been feeling that for 10 years, huh? It's still happening. The repercussions of our very wholesome, beautiful relationship that is still a wholesome and beautiful relationship. All three of us. We have separate relationships. We get together. It's still that. And it's still being judged. It's so strange to me.
No finger pointing, but in terms of, we were talking about communication, we were talking about process. How do you decide when it's over? I'm sure it's an upsetting thing on some level, but even after 2 years. Sure. But how do you, as a throuple, say, okay, here's what's best?
I think that's rough, because any one of us could feel done at a different moment. So there were moments, definitely, speaking for myself, where I thought, oh boy, I think maybe this thing is irreparably broken. In not a blamey, angry way, but in a very I don't know where we're going to go from here. But then looking at Joshua and Tony together and thinking, they seem okay. Maybe I should find a way to be okay. And I think that we all had different moments of that. And I think it took a long time for us to get on the same page at the same time about it being over, even when it started with me saying to Joshua that I said, is it good that I'm suggesting a new thing that we can try, or am I actually just banging my head against a wall and we should talk about this? And it kind of spiraled from there. Even when that happened, Tony wasn't ready to hear it. Wasn't ready to hear that it was done.
For a long time.
Yeah.
A long time. I was the most resistant. I can only imagine what the people at the courthouse, when they were getting divorced, and they were pretty good, pretty okay, and I was just a weeping puddle of I was like,
What's that guy's problem?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
yeah. It took me a long time to get out of my own denial and to recognize that everyone had to be willing to just throw it all in and be honest, and I couldn't make it work through sheer force of will, and to be able to see that it was for the best for all of us.
Which is not the preconception that a lot of people have about relationships. That
Right.
if you sacrifice a little more of yourself,
Yes.
there are still things we haven't tried yet. We could
Yep.
we could try this and we could do that, and yeah, to be able to just say, well, okay, maybe it would be healthier.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that as someone who's been divorced a couple of times.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think even through that process of trying to, I went into the closure therapy with the idea that it really was going to be for closure and going to be just for closing the door in a healthy way. And I think there was a period where Tony was like, maybe this is going to fix it. Maybe we're going to break through a door. And I had a moment of that too.
And I think
In the course of that, because that was happening for Tony, I was like, maybe
I pressured Joshua into reconsidering, like taking some time to reconsider, just staying in that horrific limbo space for a little longer, please.
Would you consider this kind of a relationship again somewhere down the road if the right circumstances presented themselves?
I'll go. I would say that I am not looking for it specifically, but if the right circumstances came along, I wouldn't be against it, because with the perspective of 2 years post-romantic relationship, the relationships are that these people are my family. I can't say that about any of my other relationships that they have, that the group of us have valued what we were to each other enough that we make an effort to get together, to talk, to see each other. Joshua's in a new relationship, and he still sees us at least once a week. We talk just about every day. It's still the healthiest relationship that I've been in. So I wouldn't discount it if something came up again, but it would need to be exceptional people, as it was this time.
Same. I wouldn't look for it, but I don't think, in the same way that when I've broken up in relationships with just one man, I've not sworn off dating just one man ever again. It doesn't feel, the stakes don't feel that high that this was an experiment that has to stand for whether or not polyamorous closed thruples work. Yeah, I think that that's unfair to put that on it. And I think that was another thing that was reflected back to us a lot that was very negative, of like, well, we're all gunning for you because if this doesn't work.
Proof positive.
Come on, make it work. We're all, this is all a TV show that we're very invested in.
It's true. That's so true. And I certainly felt that we presented so positively to people that I had to get around the idea that the fact that we don't live together anymore is not a failure. This is not a failed relationship. This is a great relationship.
We're doing so great.
Yeah.
We all still talk to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's not what you think. You know what I mean?
Right.
You think this is ending. This is a failure.
Right.
Because it's not. I feel very open.
I am so grateful to both of you for this. This has been wonderful. Closing remarks. I want to hear about Tony's flower shop, and I want to hear about your writing.
Okay.
This is the sales pitch portion of the
Awesome.
conversation.
Great.
So whoever wants to go first.
Okay. My debut is a Victorian Gothic coming-of-age, kinky romantic suspense novel called On Good Authority. It's about a lady's maid who has to teach a terrible master the difference between servitude and surrender while dealing with her own dark desire for the footman along the way. It's not erotica. That's a very important thing for me to get across. It is not erotica. there's kinky stuff in it, but it's much more focused on the emotional build of a kink relationship. How this could be catharsis, how this could be something that would bring you joy and comfort, and not what maybe a lot of people think of, which is scarier and whips and chains and that kind of thing.
The whole 50 Shades nonsense.
Yes. If I had to comp it, I would say that it is most like the film Secretary in its treatment of BDSM. And if you were to cross that with the social critique of Tess of the D'Urbervilles. So
Best elevator pitch ever. Well done.
Yeah, so that's on good authority. And
where can folks find that?
They can find it anywhere. Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can order it through any independent bookstore that you shop with. In fact, that might be the best way. But also, it's really great for authors, even if you just ask your library to get a book. I think people feel bad about doing that, but actually the library still buys the book, so it's still a book bought, and it might get circulated. And, review it, tell your friends. That's good literary citizenship more than necessarily spending your money.
We are where we are sitting right now.
Yes, Tony's Flower Shop. So I was a florist for many, many years, had a shop in Middletown, and I now run a bakery called Tony's Flower Shop, Flour. I make savory things, artisan breads, pot pies, stuffed breads, and lots of sweets inspired by my family's. A lot of the recipes are family recipes, and also I like to be inventive, so there's also unusual things. I have the best customers in the world, very loyal, wonderful people who come when I'm open, which is every Friday from 2 to 6, and Saturdays from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m.
And this is 322 Main Street in Cromwell?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And your menu's different every week, so where do people find that?
Yes, you can find my... I post my menus the night before on Instagram and Facebook at Tony's Flower Shop, Flour.
He really is like the Willy Wonka of baked goods, so you should check it out.
Thank you again, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
This is Sadie McCarthy. I'm Claire's niece.
And you've just been listening to Transqat. It is made by one of my favorite people in the world, Clare McCarthy.
Transqat is a production of Transqat Enterprises, LLC.
Copyright 2023, all rights reserved.
Join us on the web at transqat.com.
That's TRANSQAT.com.
QAT.com.
QAT.com.
There you'll find links to Transqat, the blog,
writing projects,
speaking engagements,
and our PayPal donations page.
Please consider supporting our mission with your monkeys.
Monies. Your monies.
Your monies.
Not monkeys.
Please consider supporting our mission with your monies. Any monkeys will be gratefully received as well.
Follow Transqat on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.
On TikTok, we are at The Real Transqat.
Want to tell your story on air?
Or ask Claire a question?
What is the deal?
She has all the answers.
Or suggest a guest or topic for an upcoming episode.
Use the contact page at the website
or email her directly at crmtranscat@gmail.com.
crmtranscat@gmail.com.
And thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. Bye.